All right, both Georgia Senate seats look set to head to runoff elections as no candidates in either races reached that necessary 50% vote margin needed.
That's right. So Team Rising is here to talk about that and react to all of the big news. Roger Fisk, he's a Democratic strategist, an Obama administration alum, and Tom Rogan, he's a commentary writer for the Washington Examiner, two of our favorites. It's good to see you guys. How are you?
Two highly distinguished
Good.
gentlemen.
How are you?
That's right.
Great to see you guys.
Okay, guys, let's start off with the news that we have right now, which is that Pennsylvania, Joe Biden has taken the lead. That's where we have currently only one organization, Decision Desk HQ, is called the race for Joe Biden. But it has us thinking about what the hell is going to happen if Biden does become president. Roger, let me start with you. You served in the Obama administration. To me, it very much seems like a party like its 2010 dynamic. I mean, you're going to have this Democratic president, but you're going to have this GOP Senate. How does this all work in terms of appointments, in terms of legislation, in terms of so much more? From somebody who comes from that wing of the party and who worked also within that environment, tell us what you expect to happen in the coming months.
First off, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. And it's wonderful to be here with Tom. I really enjoy his work. It will be a toxic atmosphere. I think there's an element, if there's any shred of norm left, I hope that it takes the form of Senator McConnell being willing to pass a large raft of appointees and things like that, obviously starting with the cabinet. I think if things really get to the point where you can't take a former governor or a sitting member of either chamber of Congress and nominate them for a cabinet post and actually get them through, then things have truly deteriorated. I hope that's not the case. One of the things that will be driving that, is kind of what the president does next and how this all kind of plays out. And then also, I think the first indication of what is waiting for us in January is what kind of virus relief package might get passed in December. So I think the next few hours are going to be very informative. But then what happens in the lame duck session, I think, is going to have a large impact on the flavor of what happens in January and February of next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tom, what do you think this is going to look like if we do end up with a GOP Senate, Democratic House, Democratic president? Part of me, and you and I have very different ideology, let's be clear. Part of me is worried like nothing, okay, now they're not going to be able to do anything. And Democrats have an amazing excuse for their utter impotence and incompetence, which they love to have. And then the other part of me is like afraid of what they will actually agree on and do together. Like, are we going to have another 4 years of trying to get a grand bargain and austerity and new trade deals? Let's get back to TPP and all of those things. I know you like some of these things, but how do you think that this is actually going to ultimately play out? Do you think it's going to be more just sheer gridlock, or do you think under the surface they're actually going to be working together on these more bipartisan sort of neoliberal consensus type items?
Well, let me just say as well, because Roger was so kind, he's done great work on the World War I memorial. But
guys are so charming.
I would say that to a degree, I think you're correct, that there will be cooperation between, Mitch McConnell, probably a GOP Senate when we finally get those Georgia runoff results. But I don't see how there's going to be this sort of big move back towards, for example, austerity, a kind of debt deal in the vein that I would want, but probably very few other people would want. Because I don't think the political constituency is there for that in the Republican Party. And quite frankly, I don't think it's there in the Democratic Party. I mean, Trump, if nothing else, the results of this election affirm the idea of a more populist Republican Party that is, focused on trying to maintain, the voting blocks that President Trump established. And going back to those, trade deals and debt reduction, I just don't think is going to be really on Mitch McConnell's mind. I think there will be an effort perhaps to find some compromise in areas, limited infrastructure, appointments. But at the same time, the Democratic Party, Joe Biden is going to be dealing with a party that will, to a degree, insist on, things that Mitch McConnell is not going to be able to do. So I do think there's going to be a degree of gridlock, just not total, right? That I think there will be appointments come through. There will be some limited infrastructure stuff. There will be some COVID relief, although probably not bailout for the blue states like New York and Illinois because of their pension issues. Anyway, that's my kind of top line.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, Roger, the question too, though, is that, I mean, do you view this as it's hobbling Joe Biden's presidency if that's what ends up happening with the GOP Senate, whatever happens with these Georgia runoffs? I mean, can they operate in that environment? The Obama administration, when you guys came in, you basically tried to declare war on Fox News and the Republicans and all that, and massively backfired. So, like, what is the strategy going to be learning from the Obama years?
Well, one difference, I think, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves and start assuming a Biden presidency, but let's just walk down that road for a second for the sake of answering your question. One major difference is I think we can all agree. I would be very, very shocked if the current president, should he become then the former, is just going to give the Biden administration 2 or 3 years of room to go off and do its thing, similar to what President Obama did, and then re-engage in the next cycle or whatever. I think you're going to have him, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 times a day criticizing the Biden administration. And I also think that should a vaccine come, the very fact that the vaccine will have surfaced during a Biden presidency will, by definition, make former President Trump then at that point against the vaccine, and becoming the leader of the anti-vaxxer movement will be a very natural fit for him, because it can just be a rhetorical cudgel that he uses for years. So in addition to the structural kind of barriers or obstacles that we're discussing here, I think there's going to be the atmospheric kind of component. Again, should this go the way we're discussing in this hypothetical, where you have a former president who's literally hectoring the occupant of the White House and keeping his 50, 60 million people in a constant lather, which is then going to manifest in all kinds of ways on the county level, the regional level, the state level, the national level, et cetera. So above and beyond the congressional challenges, I think there's going to be a broader kind of sociological challenge that the former president will be the cheerleader of.
Tom, my skepticism of your idea that the GOP is not going to just revert right back to deficit hawkery comes from the fact, number one, I mean, President Trump didn't really, for all his rhetoric, didn't really govern that much differently than a Mitt Romney would have. I mean, his biggest legislative accomplishment was a bunch of corporate tax cuts. And so it seems to me like the lesson that the GOP may win is like, oh, we can change our style and we can say worker more, but do the same stuff that we've been doing, and that seems to work out okay electorally. And also, even before this election, you already had a bunch of Republican senators who were like, whoa, we've been spending like drunken sailors, and we've got to get this deficit under control. You saw Mitch McConnell talking about that as well. So to me, it seems highly unlikely that they're actually going to move on any of their traditional economic orthodoxy.
I think one challenge they face is that ultimately the Democratic Party does not want to be a partner to those kind of reforms, in the way that, when Mitch McConnell and President Obama, actually via Vice President Biden, were talking about this grand debt deal, there was a political constituency that wanted it on both sides, a significant one. That doesn't exist anymore. And I also think the degree to which, Republicans are going to quickly find, I think, their ability to mobilize those Trump voters, GOP voters, is very different than President Trump. I think President Trump's Twitter feed, as silly as it might sound, and actually it's not silly, will be an important part, actually, of Republicans being able to align the base in support of things. And more than that, following, quite frankly, what that base wants. I slightly disagree on the vaccine point, because I think, one of President Trump's things, you would say his legacy accomplishments has been the idea of the working class having a political voice, having a political power in Washington. Ultimately, the damage that the virus has done, especially to people who need to be out and about to make their livelihoods, means that I would be skeptical even that President Trump would do that, because I do think he has a sense of loyalty with those people. We shall see.
Well, we want to get into what exactly we think President Trump is going to do, especially given the election results. We'll dig into that with Team Rising right after this.